Hello and welcome to the CRJ-1000 or the CRJ-X updated review / look at / short flight. If you don't already own this product and you're wondering, shall I get it, shan't I? Hopefully by the end of this video your mind will be up. It's not my first time flying this aircraft. I first flew it around 3 months ago. Let's bring us on over into xplane. There we go. We're on the ground here at Seattle waiting. So I first flew this aircraft when it came out on release, day 1, version 1, and I wasn't blown away by it. There were several things that weren't working right. There were some flaws with the aircraft and so forth. There's been around 12 or 13 updates since that time. And so here we are, as I record this in the middle of summer 2023. And I will tell you exactly what I find with this aircraft. And a little disclaimer, not disclaimer, a little spoiler, should I perhaps say. I did fly this aircraft yesterday, and there were enough reasons I felt for me to give it another flight, another review. Disclaimer then, first off, I am not in any way paid or given anything to make these videos, which is how I feel it should be. As soon as channels start receiving stuff from certain people, the biases creep in, whether they're explicitly, you will only say good things, or otherwise, you know, if I don't say good things about this aircraft, then next month they're probably not going to put me on the payroll anymore. And either way, you're not going to get any of that here. So and for those just wondering, you know, that doesn't really go on. Yes, it does. I operate 3 separate YouTube channels, all of which are pretty small. The Games with Brains is below 1,000. I've got another that's above and another that's just past 5,000. And I am getting... on this channel here, the Games with Brains, the smallest of the 3, I'm already getting sent games from a developer all the time at release for free. All the key codes that, you know, regular people need to... because they're hoping I will play them, and then that will generate interest, and then people will buy. And I'm not interested in it, but my point is, if a tiny channel's getting that, what are the bigger channels getting? My 5,000 one's already got a sponsorship deal. So it's not to brag, it's to let those people who know, who rather don't know, who don't have a YouTube channel to create stuff, these things can and do happen all the time. So let's get on with the aircraft itself then. So here we are, CRJ-1000. This is exactly how it starts, except for the door, which I have opened for the purposes of, well, getting into the aircraft right now. So that is the only thing. It's on the ground. It's always started with the ground power unit plugged in and in a dark, cold and dark state, which is as you want it. And so I'm just going to jump on into the cockpit. Let's fade the sounds in, and I'll make a start. By the way, here we see the sounds are on. This is outside, which sounds, you know, sounds like there's a little bit of wind here at the airfield. As soon as we get inside the aircraft, even in this view, and so, is that realistic? I don't know, man. I mean, you know, whether the door's open or not, you'd expect the sound to be a little quieter, but not completely on-off. Okay, so this is, again, half review, half just having a flight, half me just shooting the breeze with you, all right, on this particular aircraft. So if you're here just for a very slick demonstration on how to do certain things, it's probably not the right video. And so first off, I'm going to bring up the flight plan, which I've already loaded in here, so that you can all see that there, Seattle, Tacoma, Tacomox in Canada. The code, in case anybody wants to fly this at any time, Kilo Sierra Echo Alpha to Charlie Yankee Quebec. We're flying as British Airways 4452, and don't ask what is a British Airways doing on the west coast of the US, going to the west coast of Canada. I don't know. Coming over here then to the left panel, here we've got the door indicator. So let's go through this tablet again for those unfamiliar with the aircraft. So you come in, you've got this screen here, which is just basically the standby. You know, there's nothing on. Very basic tablet here. You've got this option here for the doors. Actually looks like a speaker. To me, that is a speaker icon, but it controls the doors. Perhaps that's an icon that the team at Deltawing might want to work on. Just do a door frame with a simple doorknob. Yes, it doesn't look like an aircraft door, but people know what it means. To me, that looks like a speaker. I suppose if you squint, turn your head sideways, you can just about imagine an aircraft door. Here we've got the aircraft options. So you've got use external power. Again, this is on by default. Just click in the box to turn them off. I assume this gets your cockpit ready to certain states. I'm not going to use that. What I am going to do, however, is just put a little bit of music on. Just so I don't feel like I'm completely in silence. Just real gentle. I hope I don't find it too distracting. Just until we get the aircraft systems on. So we've got that. I'm going to go just using the aircraft battery. I realize, you know, at an airport, you generally always use external power. But just, you know, so that we can show that we can do it without... We've got the passenger loadout here, very, very basic. 0 to 100, that is it. You can't choose where they sit. It just goes as is. The payload item, which is this one here, is grayed out, and it's been like that since day one. And so even though, if you remember, these here, by the way, are not passenger doors. These are cargo doors. We can open them. They do work. They are animated, but we can't shove anything in there. I do hope they change that sooner rather than later. But for now, the only payload or the impact you can have on weight is by adjusting passenger numbers. And here, which that does look like fuel the fuel. And again, default is just maximum passengers, maximum fuel for our flight. We'll have to tone that down a little bit today. We've got some settings here which do save between sessions. So I like my tinted glass, which if we come out, you can see it's got like this nice sort of bluish, almost mirror-like tinge to it. If we come back in here and set that to normal glass and come outside, you can see now it's this just much more clearer and see-through, which, you know, is all right, but I really prefer the tinted one, and I think British Airways rock with that tinted one anyway, so we'll stick with that. We've then got the internal view, so we've got normal and tinted. I prefer normal just because it's, well, it's a little easier to see. If we put tinted on, it puts like this darkened effect on all the glass, which I don't think is needed. In fact, it's kind of weird. Look, as we change height, it seems to impact in a weird kind of way. So we'll just stick with normal. We've then got cockpit displays, no reflection, medium and high. Let's try that because the no reflections just make these look a little bit like black holes. Let's go for medium. There we go. There's like a slight... That looks a lot better, actually. And so let's go with medium. Let's just try high. Just so we... Oh, that's too much already. Look on the tablet. The reflections there. To me, a little... Certainly, if the sun comes around, that's going to be a little distracting. Yeah, this looks a little better. These on high actually look pretty good. I'll tell you what, we'll leave it on high unless there's a reason to change it back in the flight. We've also got sounds here. Just leave them all at default, which is all on full blast. Miscellaneous, the single flight queue director. You get, you know, the usual. You get the cross on, you know, your flight director, your flight path director. And this turns the cross into this little sort of chevron thing that I'm sure you've seen on some aircraft like a Learjet. We'll stay as the captain and everything else. Yeah, we're not using VR. We've got the info screen here. So once you've got your weights and everything set up right, this will give you your speeds for takeoff and landing. I like to rock as pounds, and so I will leave that as imperial. If you do prefer the kilo metric, you've got that option right there. And so without any further ado, let's go ahead and make a start. And so we're going to come over here. Notice that the AC light here is now extinguished. That's because we got rid of ground power. So we're going to make use of the battery here. By the way, I'm a huge fan of all modules that do this. The Deltawing CRJ-X here is no exception. All buttons that you see are, you know, push buttons. You click with the mouse in the way that you'd expect. You just press it in. All switches like this, you don't click. You use the mouse wheel in the direction that you want to flick the switch. And so if it's just a 2-position switch like this one, you just mouse wheel up and down. That makes sense. But when there's switches like this that have 3 positions or even more, that becomes really important. And I know, you know, some modules do this, but some don't. For example, the TOLIS A321 does not do this. And so if it's a 3-position switch, you've got to click sometimes. And sometimes clicking twice puts the switch into a setting that you don't want. I mean, for goodness sake, hydraulics, on, off, auto. I mean, if the only choice that you've got is to click, it's going to forcibly cycle through that, potentially in a position that you didn't want it. And so, yeah, huge fan of that. And so I want the battery on, so I'm going to scroll mouse wheel down with my mouse in the area. And with that, we're on. And so with that, I'm going to just get rid of the music. We don't need it now. We can listen to the aircraft sounds as we get underway. Also, I do have my overlay for the flight today, so I'm going to put that on there from SimBrief, so that'll give you some route information. Notice now we've got the power on. I'll just turn that down just for a moment. We get the very basic instrumentation on that's battery only, including the standby artificial horizon with the basic aircraft information, speed, height, and so forth. These 2 screens, and that is it. We also get the MC light illuminating and a continuous warning. That stays on, I assume, so there's no chance anybody can accidentally flick that switch and nobody notice. And so let's extinguish that, and with that we can put the volume back to full. And so I'm going to get DC service on, which is for direct current, so I assume if you're not using the AC, you need this switch on to provide power to additional aircraft systems. I don't know that for sure. I'm just going to assume it. And so I'm going to switch it on like that. I guess it's a little bit like an inverter, but don't quote me on that. And with that now, we can make a start on the APU. One thing about the APU to be aware of. See here, APU door open. And there's no EGT display here. This is what confuddled me the first time I used it. Here's the APU panel on the upstairs. We've got 2 switches. This one here actually turns on the power, as far as I can tell, for the fuel that is required to use the APU. So don't just think, oh, start, stop, that's it. You need to press this one. There is no light, though. If you see, there's like a pump fail light and a SOV fail. That's it. So if we press that once, seems like nothing's happened. But if we look down here, now we get that EGT thing that I was telling you about. Now the APU is ready to go. And if we press the start stop, sounds good, right? Sounds like the packs immediately start up, which I find a little odd. EGT already stabilizing well before we get to 80% RPM. I'm not sure what that's about. I've noticed this is a bit of a theme in the CRJ-X that we're flying today. I'm not sure. Again, this does not happen in the Boeings. It doesn't happen in the Airbuses. RPMs crank up. EGT goes up with it. Only once RPM reaches 100% does then the EGT begin to stabilize, whether you're talking APU, whether you're talking engine start, whatever. I'm sure there are some exceptions somewhere. Could the CRJ-X be one of those? Maybe. Just an observation that if it is, to me it just don't feel right, but, you know, somebody feel free. You know, you CRJ real pilots, do leave us a comment on that, what you find with the EGT temperatures. Alright, so now we've got power on. We take a look, the aircraft's immediately powered. It's a little bit like an Airbus in that regard. If we take a look at the generator switches here, we've got generators 1, 2, and in the middle we've got the APU gen for the left and right engines, clearly 1 and 2. They're not an on position, it's automatic or off. And so in my opinion, we just leave them all on automatic all the time. And that is very Airbus-y-like. Here we've got the fuel boost pumps. We see they're on in-op. I'm going to turn those on now just because we've got the APU up and running. Although, just before I do, if we take a look at the aircraft fuel, APU is running. Take a look at the left wing. Notice the fuel's not leaking, that's the incorrect word. Draining out the left tank to feed the APU. That's standard on most aircraft. The left wing feeds the APU. And so we are seeing that work there. So it's not like, oh, well, you have to put the pumps on in order to run the APU. See, we see it there. I'm going to turn these on and just see if that makes any difference at all. And not at this stage. It's still the left tank feeding the APU, which is what I'd expect, but I was just curious. We're going to be draining some of that fuel out momentarily anyway. All right, come down here. We've got the date. This is the date as of me filming this right now. And if I press, we've got the stopwatch here as well as the ET. So we can switch between these. And we've also got a mode here. Let's just reset in case that was going. One thing I'm not keen on is once you start the clock, the dots in the middle should blink on and off to basically let you know it's running. I mean, clearly we can see it's running, but the dots should be flickering in between. That's a standard thing on all digital displays counters. That's not unique to aircraft by any stretch. Reset. There we go. So it's a 3-press one. Start, stop, and reset. The mode here changes between date and time. And this here is real time because I've got real time, real weather on. I'm in the UK, which in the middle of summer means we're in summertime. So it's actually 10 to 4 where I live, not 10 to 3. But, you know, UTC, Zulu time, British time in the winter, all the same thing. And so nice to see that's working. Regardless, point is, the time here is not local to where we are. In other words, Seattle. It is Zulu time, which is what they should be. All aircraft should show that. Certainly anything other than a little Cessna. Integrated lighting, we'll have a quick look at that. We can see that works really well. I love that. One thing is a bit of a frustration to me with some aircraft, this aircraft doesn't suffer from it, is the lighting. Lighting, you should be able to see it like this, whether it's day or night. And here we can clearly see, turning up the panel lighting, even during the day, is very easily, obviously visible, as it should be. It shouldn't be impossible to tell if you've got the lights on during the day. We'll put the smoking signs on, and we'll leave the seatbelt signs for now. Air conditioning packs, I've found... I haven't actually tested the packs, whether they pressurize the cabin, but in terms of air conditioning, hot, cold, this makes no difference whatsoever. I was fiddling with it yesterday just to check. It doesn't, so I'll save you the bother. And yeah, so let's crack on then. So we've got the nav lights to go. Let's put the logo lights on. We've got the ELT here, which is like your emergency doodah thing. Obviously, it's not going to have any bearing. If you crash in the sim, nobody's coming out to rescue you. It's up to you to respawn. Emergency lights, will arm those. I'm fan of this switch. Again, it's a 3-position. You've got your on, off, and arm position, so we'll switch that into the arm mode. I've not actually tested it to see what it looks like. And with that, we're now powered. There is no, by the way, I'm looking up here for the IRSs, the INSs, you know, whether you're Airbus or Boeing, you're used to seeing those switches up here somewhere. This aircraft not only doesn't have them, the thing just quote-unquote works. And so as best I can tell, there is nowhere that, even if you wanted to, you could turn them off or have them not working or mess up your startup process. They just work. So if we come over here to the pause in button, you can see it doesn't do anything. If we come up to the IRS CTL, which I suppose is your controls for the IRS, you see key not active. So it's not simulated. So that'll be a relief to some. Means you don't got to sit around for 7-8 minutes during your start waiting for the thing to align. It just works. Status page, this one does. And if we take a look at this, there's been a bunch of updates, and this shows here we're using the latest version of xplane. The date today, as we've said, UTC time 1452, which, surprise, surprise, matches with up there. And we've got the latest Navigraph IRAC cycle. That leads us to the pause init page, which, surprise, surprise, does work, even though it didn't on the previous menu, which is interesting. And that lets us put in our identifier, and we are at Seattle. So KC, or Kilo Sierra Echo Alpha for those with a small screen. That puts the relevant information on there, which we can check together with airport location. So if I just bring our page up here for the airports, Seattle airport page, the -9, and here we go, Seattle. We've got there our coordinate system, and if I just move the screen over, airport location north 47 26 99. This is according to our aircraft. According to SimBrief, according to Navigraph, which is just Jeppesen really. It's north 4727-0. So 27-0, 26-99 is about as close as it gets. So we're talking a discrepancy of a couple of yards. West 122.187, west 122.187. So all of that is an agreement. I'm happy with that. Longest runway is basically 12,000 feet long, which is more than long enough. Elevation, it says here 433. Navigraph says 432. It's within a foot. No discrepancy really there whatsoever to worth talking about. It's a rounding error, and that is it. All right. Taking a look at the flight plan then, so we'll move on through this. Now we've got that in. We'll come over to the index page. We come over to the route menu page. You see disc route list is INOP, but the pilot route list is not. If we click on that, this has every flight plan you've ever done on SimBrief loaded in. You can see I've got 9 pages full. And you know, as long as you import those flight plans, I just use the SimBrief importer to do it because I'm a lazy git and it does it for you. But the point is, it's all there. Our flight today, as we mentioned, is Seattle to Comox, which is Charlie, Yankee, Quebec, Quebec. So all of this is in alphabetical order, not in date order. So I'm going to have to scroll through next page, and I'm just looking for when the Kilo Sierras begin. There's Kilos. There's Kilo Sierra Echo Alpha to Charlie, Yankee, Quebec, Quebec. There's always a 01 on the end. That's a SimBrief thing. And we can see once we progress beyond that, we're on the lemurs. And so that is the one that I'm after. And if we just take a look at the charts just to verify that, Kilo Sierra Echo Alpha, Charlie, Yankee, Quebec, Quebec. So that matches up. That brings on our origin and our destination. I'm happy with that. Distance on here says 178. Take a look here. The distance says, and we're talking about the ground distance here, 200. Why the discrepancy? I believe because this is as the crow flies, or it is without any SIDS and stars put in. I haven't figured out which one. The distance here, 22 miles further, is further, I believe, because of the, because of what we just mentioned, the SIDS and stars. So you approach or your departure, you go a certain route. This hasn't counted it, whereas this has. Origin runway. This is where you'd expect to put your departure on. And if we take a look here, our departure is 16 left here out of Seattle. It doesn't work. So 16 left. Boom. Doesn't work. However, if we go to the departure page, it does work. It does let you put it in. So it's another one of those. That's the second time we've run into that already in this video, where you'd expect to put some information in on one page. It won't let you, but then you can put the exact same piece of information in on another page, and it works fine and as you'd expect. Flight number down here, so we'll just put that in. British Airways we're flying as, so BAW really. 4452. And boom, that goes in there. All right, another big fan of this. This was not like this when the aircraft first came out. Every time you make some changes that require the FMC unit or the McDo or whatever you want to call this doodah, you get this little exec button. Those of you that fly the Boeing, you'll get that doot sound, and you'll get the exec button sort of lighting up, basically prompting you, hey, you've made changes, but you need to execute in order for me to process those. Well, this now tells you there with that exec. Never used to do that. Of course, yours truly then just went ahead and started to do other things, and then halfway into the video was like, why is this not working? Well, they've thought of that. They've idiot-proofed it for people like myself, and boom, let's hit it, and now we're in. So that is now active. So fantastic. So let's then proceed to the next page. Note here, by the way, this caught me out the first time I did this. We've got your information there. Come to your next page. Here we've got your waypoints, and some people say, well, duh, that's how it is. But if we come back to the previous page, your first waypoint's actually down here. You see, it's a via direct, so there is no SID and star. So don't be thinking, oh, it's missed my first waypoint off, like I did. It's down there. So your first waypoint here, that is a waypoint that we're going to be getting rid of with regards to our departure on this particular flight. The reason I'm wanting to do this is just to show that we can modify the flight slightly. So if we come back to the Sim Toolkit Pro screen a sec, I've already put our departure in here. So if we take a look, we're departing 16 left in all likelihood, which is down south. And then this here is our departure, which I've programmed in. It's known as the Banger 9 departure. However, our aircraft doesn't have that loaded in. Our aircraft has a first waypoint here directly from the airport. If you remember, it was a direct route in. And so we're going to change that a bit. And we're going to hook up at Charlie Victor Victor VOR. So that is our route. Potentially a little bit of weather there. And we're not going to be on sim brief, but it looks like we've got a controller there. And then here we're going to come in to land on, what was it? I think it was runway 12. That's it, runway 12. Originally, it was planning us for runway 30, which would have been straight in, which would have made this whole route a little boring. Just a straight line from Charlie Victor Victor all the way down to the numbers. I want a little bit of a turn, just, you know. And because this aircraft has no auto throttle, so there's no VNAV, there's no putting a speed and hold. We need to work the throttles the entire time. We need to really be on the ball when it comes to top of descent. I have no idea what the figures are, so we're just going to have to come up with something as we go. 3-to-1 descent ratio, and then props a bit extra as well, just for good measure. All right, so let's come back into X-Plane. We've seen exactly what the story is there. And so let's come over and make that setup. So if I set up the screen in such a way that hopefully we can see everything. By the way, the EFIS display controls that you're used to on the Airbus and Boeing that are here are down here in the CRJ. So if you want to view your plans set up and so forth, you have to control them down there, which if you're sat here can feel a little bit like it's out the way. So it may be worth either setting up a camera view to do that, or just binding some of these to a specific control. But for now, we'll just make use of moving the camera around. I'm not sure which is the right one for setup. It could be that one. Let's increase the range. I don't know. I'll tell you what, that one looks okay for now. And so here you see our departure is not in there because, again, there isn't one programmed in yet. There's our destination, Charlie, Yankee, Quebec, Quebec, but there is no SID or star. We see it straight from Nanu to the runway, or the airport, I should say. And so let's come over here to our departure arrivals page. We've got Seattle departure, Charlie, Yankee, Quebec, Quebec, arrival. Clearly, Seattle's got arrival in case it all goes wrong on departure. We need to return PDQ. Which we won't need to today. So departures, we've got all the departures here, we've got the runways here. Just before we do, let's just confirm with Seattle that we are expecting 16 left for departure. We see Seattle here, the ATIS is 118.0. Give us a good excuse to test out the radios as well. And so 118.0, so we'll select it here. We'll dial in 118. Oh, sorry, that's the nav. What an idiot. 118.0, and then we'll get it across.
32,500. Temperature 8. Dew point 6. Altimeter 2989. Arriving runway
2989. So we'll start with that.
6 center. 16 right. Departing runway 16 left. 16 right. Advise on initial contact. You have information. Delta.
All right, departing 16 left, 16 right. We have Delta. Okay, so let's just get rid of that. By the way, one thing I did find, I'll just show it now so it's done.
Variable visibility.
If I just turn that down momentarily, there is no volume control for this radio. I've just turned the game sounds down. And so you say, yeah, there is. Look, down here. Here, it says, look, VHF 12.
Altimeter 2989. Arriving runway 16.
It don't do anything.
16 center.
And if you press them, they light up, but as soon as you let go of the mouse button, they go away again. So I have to hold the mouse button, so you can't turn them on or off. They're just on the whole time. So the way to turn them off is basically detune them. Again, perhaps something that Deltawing want to look at some point. I know it's pretty much a standard thing on all aircraft these days, modules, that you can fiddle with the volume controls down here. So that there is that. Alright, so with that, we've confirmed the altimeters. The winds were light. Runway 16 left and right for departure, so we'll take 16 left because it's nearest and it's in our plans, so that's good. So coming over here, runway 16 left, that's in. That filters out all the unsuitable departures, which is what you'd expect. And then we've got Banger 9. Banger 9, by the way, if we just have a look up here. Again, I only know this because I tried to record this yesterday, and then yours truly screwed it up big time. We see here that Banger 9 has a couple of transitions here, Ari and Pangle. There we see them, Ari and Pangle. We're not interested in those because from Banger, we want to go straight on to Pencove, which was this VOR beacon that we was on about. Charlie, Victor, Victor. If we look here, we're going to get rid of Papa Alpha Echo. Like I said, we were getting rid of that one. Going direct to Charlie, Victor, Victor here. So that point there, that star, the second one along, is this one here. So we'll go from Banger to there. And so in theory, we should be able to rig all of this up just fine. And so with the appropriate stuff selected there, let's hit exec to execute. That now fills that in. And here you can see why binding that zoom in out control may be useful. And so there's our departure in a southerly direction. We swing around to the right. There's Banger. And then on to Charlie, Victor, Victor. We can see why we don't want to go to Papa Alpha Echo. Pulls us out the way a little bit too much. And so in order to do that, if we come over to the legs page, and I'm going to just scroll, hang on, next page. Here we go. There's Charlie, Victor, Victor. That's the one we want to go to. There's Banger itself, which is the last point on our departure because we're not going through the transitions. This is the one we want rid of. The way that you do it for the U Airbus slot is, you Boeing people will know, you just select the waypoint that you want and then you up-select it where you want it to go. In this case, we want this one here to be here. So you just press there, boom, and it gets rid of it. One thing that you won't see on here, and I don't know if this is a CRJ-ism or if this is just Deltawing and they haven't got to it yet, there is no preview line. So obviously we've got rid of Papa Alpha Echo, so you'd see here usually like a dotted line of, is this what you want? And then you'd hit the exec to basically confirm it, yes. As there isn't one, I'm just going to hit exec and boom, it does, you know, exactly what we wanted. And so you're going to have to use your mind's eye to ensure that you've got sort of what you want and just hope that you're right before you mess up your entire plan. If we scroll through to the next page, we see here that this takes us all the way to Nanu. And after Nanu, there's nothing left. And so Nanu is our final waypoint. We see there is actually a direct to Charlie Yankee Quebec, Quebec, but that isn't a waypoint per se. It's the airport. There's no runway yet selected. So you'd come into your depart arrival, you'd rig that up. We're going to do that once we're in the air, just so we can get cracking. And so at this moment in time, we've got the weather, we've got our initial nav stuff. Let's switch this mode over to something that looks like it will be suitable for flying. So I'm just going to scroll left 1, left 2. That one there looks pretty good. I'm going to zoom in. Let's come over to here. Let's set up our fuel and weight. This is an instantaneous adjust, by the way. You don't got to wait for it. I always prefer if it's a gradual thing, but it's a minor thing. It's just to avoid the aircraft jolting around. That's the only reason, and you know, I prefer it like that. So let's come over here. We'll go with our weights, and then we can get pushed back right away. And so page 3. See, total fuel weight today is 6.1, so that always gets rounded up. And then, well, let's go to page 1. I'll show you what I'm talking about. So the way that this is done, 6,118 gets rounded up to 6,200, and then always an extra 100 on top of that is 6,300. That's just the standard way things are done. Of course, you know, you can mess around with that to your heart's content. And so let's just click here, 6,300, boom. We got to bear in mind that this is going to be trickling away the whole time because the APU is running. You can see there the total fuel draining out. So let's not mess around. Min takeoff is 5.8. So we'll bear that in mind. Come over to page 3 and we're going to get our payload. Again, cargo 4.5. There is no option for us to cargo. SimBrief still seems a little glitched in that regard. I tried to put in 0.1 on the cargo and it still gives me 4.5. I don't know why. Coming over to the passengers, max 100. We see here we've got an estimated number of 80. I'm going to leave it at 100 for no other reason than to try and offset the discrepancy between not being able to put any cargo in. You see here, that gives us a total takeoff weight of 77.2. If we come over to the info, our weight is actually 72.8. So quite a discrepancy. We're about 4,500 pounds lighter than what our plan gives us at. But, you know, we'll make it work. It's a couple of tons. We can do it. We'll just carry some illegal contraband and nobody will be any the wiser. All right. This page here is a pretty good one to leave it on once everything's set. The only thing I want to do is check the doors. There we go. Don't want to fly with an open door. I'm not sure if it would cause a problem. Some modules, yes. Others, no. It just depends if they've simulated the pressurization stuff. Here we see we've got the speeds here. So, again, there's no auto throttle. So, there's no setting your takeoff speeds on this device. So, once it's done, as far as I'm aware, but just leave it on the legs page. You may want to use the radio button and tune in some VORs or NDBs for backup. Do you know what? We're trying to show things. Let's just show them. So our VOR for departure, in case it all goes wrong, is 16.8. So I'll put that in on your side, nav 2. 16.8. Boom. And nav. You see here, it's got automatic frequency tuning, but it is in-op. So they've not gotten to that bit yet. And so you have to put in if you need your VORs or NDBs or whatever, you have to do it manually. ATC frequency 4452. We've said we're going to go roll with that. And then my nav 1 is going to be, if it all goes wrong, I need to come back to land very quickly on my depart, which was 16 left. And the freak for that is 1030. So 1030. Boom. No way that I've found to put a course information in here. There is a course dial, but as I was twizzling it, that's the word that we want to use. Where are we? Here we go. Here's the course dial. As I twizzle it round, take a look down here. I'm not seeing any evidence of anything anywhere being manipulated, so I'm going to leave it at that. All right, let's get cracking then. So pushback plan there from gate. Back here.
Ground to cockpit, plan acknowledged. Call me through the menu when you are ready.
We're ready.
Ground to cockpit, tow is driving up.
All right, and so with that, let's put these signs on. And everything there is looking good. I found that the bleed air source here, that they've just not simulated the whole duct bleed thing. So whether the bleed source is engines left or right or APU, either way, the bleed is going to be working. So if we come over here to ECS, for example, we see here currently the APU is feeding pack 1 and pack 2. All the valves are open. So if we come over here and say, well, yeah, that's because your isolation valve switch is open. All right, well, let's close it then. Come and look back down here.
Okay, all doors and hatches are closed, ready to connect.
See there that the isolation valve is still open. So it's just shows that system depth wise, it's not the deepest study level aircraft, but that isn't to say it's rubbish either. It's
in position.
It's a nice
brake when ready to start pushback.
It's a nice mid-ranger, and the price is set to reflect that. All right, so the guy's ready to push us back. I want to show you what happens here, but for now, I'm going to put the beacon light on. I'm going to set the aircraft camera outside because I think this is a course. So it comes with its own little pushback truck. And notice this guy's here. He's tied up the nose wheel and he's sat right there. So I'm going to press my brake pedals. At least they've got that. If you press left and right brake pedals, it disconnects to parking brake, which is as it should be. Watch what happens when I do so. 3, 2, 1. So he pulls the aircraft nose onto this little contraption. If you're in the cockpit and this happens, you think, whoa, what's happening? We're skidding into the aircraft building. That's why. And then lifts the nose wheel up. That's pretty standard. Teleports himself into there.
Starting pushback, and you may start engines.
And there we go. Starts to push back as nice as that. And there we go. So coming inside then, let's go for the engine start. I'm not sure if you have to turn the packs off or not for engine starts. So you just turn them off by doing that. By the way, these switches, the buttons used to be offset, so they fixed that. I'm going to leave the packs on and see if it is possible to start the engines up with the packs on. By the way, overhead panel light in here as well. And again, it's like you don't even need to go above halfway, even during the day. That's very visible, and yet you can go further should you want, which is arguably too much. Let's try then an engine start. So coming down here. By the way, I'm not one for checklists. You know, to me, this checklist on it is ample, and it begins at after takeoff, which is great, right? So I'm sure there'll be someone saying, "Hey, you didn't do the diddle." Yeah. I didn't, but I can still fly it. Alright, let's come back to the status page here, and we're going to go for the engine start. I do like these little safety levers so you can't accidentally put fuel on, you know, unless you really intend it. I guess it's because you don't lift the throttle up and out. Those of you that, well, you know what I mean, if you're flying anything or if you've got, I think the Warthog throttle, you know, you can lift that one up and out as well. So it's, you know, this is in lieu of that. So let's see if we can start then. So we've got the starter switches here. I'm just going to go straight off for the engine 2 start, just because most, you know, that's how most aircraft roll, right? Engine 2. Starter switch on, so I'm going to let go of the starter. And we got rotation. N2, that is just so fast. Is that realistic, guys? We're already at 25%. Let's pick up that safety valve. We'll put fuel in. There we go. I didn't move it all the way forward. And immediately we've got an ignition. Look how quick that ITT is stabilized. It's already stabilizing, even as we're hearing it cranking. I'll show it for the other one and let you choose for yourself what you think. And so there we go. Engine 2 is started. I'm going to put... Let's just start left. Stabilizing. Dump fuel. I don't know. Do let us know what you think. But now we've got both engines are in and the safety catches are on. I'm going to go ahead and set all these hydraulic systems to automatic. 1, 2, 3, 4. Should have probably done at least some of those beforehand, but never mind. They're now done. Gens are automatic, so again, engines have it. So in theory, at this point, we can get rid of the APU, so let's do so. And we still have power, which is great. And so we didn't need to turn the packs off. It's all automatic. We've got here the recirc fan.
Operation complete. Set parking brake.
Which we'll do. We've got the cargo here. I'm going to set... We've got off, air, and condition air. I'm just going to set to air. Again, I don't think any of that is simulated, but just, you know, it's fun pressing switches, right? He says pushback complete. You don't need to... So here I've got my pedals. You don't need to push these down in order to use the parking brake handle. You know, some airliners, you need to push both pedals down in order to pull it. This, you can just pull the handle like this, and...
Disconnecting tow. Stand by.
And he's happy. Alright, so... Let's come over then to the legs page. We'll take a look at the takeoff info here. So we've got load takeoff speed, so we're going to hit that now. So that's done. So V1 is at 117, rotating at 17, and if it all goes wrong, it's 130. We're giving the signals. And I guess VFTO is your flat retraction speed at 175. Trim 7.5 for takeoff. If we come over to the... where are we here? The flight control surfaces. This will give us a nice idea where our trim is. See, the default trim is for 6. So I'm just going to trim up
is disconnected and
very fast there.
And has been removed. Hand signal will be on the right. We'll see you next time and have a great flight.
Thank you very much. All right, let's do a quick flight controls check. So that's left all the way neutral. And if I just camera back, let's go over here a little bit. There you can see the flight controls. So let's go right all the way neutral. all the way forwards, neutral, all the way aft, neutral, and left rudder in all the way, neutral, and right rudder in all the way, neutral. That's great. One thing I've noticed that they've not simulated is the tiller. Now, I use the tiller, and it does control the aircraft, but they haven't animated the little tiller device here, so there is that. All right, so he's done all of that. Let's see if we can extinguish all the caution lights. So we've got the taxi lights. We'll turn that on in a sec. So let's come do it then. So we've got our anti-skid. I'm not sure if you're supposed to wait till pushback's complete or not. I just have horrific memories of pushback tugs spinning this aircraft with donuts. So anti-skid switch is now armed. We've got the Mac trim, which is this one here. So I'll press that. That's extinguished. Coming over here, we've got noseable steering. I'm going to arm that, seeing as we're now free of the tug. And then we've got the anti-ice. I do like the windshields got off, low, and high, so it's not just on or off. And when I flew this for the first time, again, we're talking like 3 months ago, I flew it low, I went high. It was colder back then, clearly. And low, the window did ice up, and I actually had to move these switches onto high, which did eventually resolve the situation. So at least that side of things seemed to be simulated. And then we've got the probe heats there. And take a look, all the lights are off. And so with that, let's release the parking brakes. Aircraft jolts a little bit, and I'm at idle thrust, and you see it's creeping along. And it never gets any faster than this. So this is idle thrust without brakes. By the way, here's my tiller, just to show that that is working. And you can see there, not animated. All right, let's carry on then. So recognition light, taxi light, we'll turn that on. And we'll put the sound back, and let's make some power. One thing, by the way, I have noticed as well. So as I'm moving the throttles, here we've got the engine instrumentation. Just look at the ITT. To me, that don't seem right. Look at the fuel flow. So as I put more power in, fuel flow increases, then N1 and N2 increases, which is what you'd expect, right? But the ITT should then follow on from the N1 and the N2. It shouldn't be instantaneous. So literally watch as I move the throttles like that. Look at the ITT. Again, it's just, I got to point out the good, the bad, and the ugly on this aircraft to give you guys a fair indicator. Again, I'm sure it's just one little update patch away from being resolved. It's just, hopefully, I also like to think if I point things out. I tell you what, the very first thing I ever pointed out on day one, the first problem that I pointed out was fixed on the very first patch that Deltawing released. So they do watch, and they do pick up on, you know, what the community is saying. I have to say, by the way, Deltawing, they've got this very active technical support forum where the staff, either whether it's customer relations or the team at Delta, whoever it exactly is, but they are constantly on there interacting with the people who, the customers like myself, who buy stuff from them, in this case the CRJ-1000, and have some sort of issue. And they're not just, oh, well, have you tried resetting the computer? When it's their fault, they acknowledge it. They say the team's aware of it. It'll be in the next patch, you know, that kind of thing. So hats off to them. You know, we know the more complex software gets, the more difficult it becomes. By the way, I love the way that this aircraft leans over slightly to one side when we go round. Look at the artificial horizon down there from that turn. Here, I'll just, let's do it here. I love that. Again, it just gives you that feeling that there's this little bit of weight to the aircraft. Taxiing this aircraft feels so much better than it did when it came out. It really feels like there's a bit of weight to it. It's nowhere near as twitchy as it used to be. It's like when I put the tiller across, it actually takes a little bit of time for the aircraft to respond, which is what you'd expect. It's not just this instantaneous jerky motion. Those of you that have flown flights in 2020, man, how do you put up with that taxiing? It is, I mean, I fly 2020. Don't get me wrong, the graphics are incredible. The lighting, you know, is to die for. But man, some of the realism in the taxiing, it's just like, it's worse than FSX, which is what I don't understand. Flight Sim 2020 is less realistic than Flight Sim X, which blows my mind. I just think somebody, whether it was Asobo or Microsoft, said, you know what, we're going to do this sim, we're going to blow it away with graphics, but we're going to tone the realism down so it's accessible for everyone. I think that's what they did. Alright, so here we are. So let's take, just before we get onto the runway, parking brake, let's take a quick look at the flaps sitting. So here's the flap lever. We've got 0, 1, 8, if I recall right, yeah, 0, 1, 8, 20, 30, 45. And here we've got the flap and slap display. So if I go flap lever 1, you're just going to have to trust that's what I'm doing. You see, all of that does is puts down the half of the slat. The slat's actually got 2 settings on the front. It puts down the first half. That's pretty standard. Flaps 1 just dumps the slats as, you know, that's a standard thing. If I go flaps 8, you can see the number there. Actually moves the flaps as well as the slats, and we see their position 8. Going now to flaps 20, we get another notch of flap, but still not yet the slats. I actually have to go to the next notch, and then we get the slats coming out, and flaps 30, and then one more notch clearly is flaps full. I'm not entirely sure what the standard is for takeoff, but I suspect short runway it might be flaps 20, for a longer runway flaps 8, or even flaps 1, I don't know. Perhaps somebody again can let us know. I'm going to roll with flaps 8. Let's release the parking brakes, and let's assume now we are clear for takeoff. And so down here, where am I? No, I don't want to be down there. Let's put a bit of power on. A little bit of a turn going. Radio, here we go. Transponder is now on. Bit more power, come on. There we go. And it's coming up here, strobe lights on. We'll put the wing lights on. Landing lights left and right. Nose light will wait until we're rolling down the runway. Just ding-dong the crew there. As far as I'm aware, there's no weather radar on this. At least not that jumped out at me. Quick check down the final. Looks good. Just come to slow it a little bit before we start this turn so we don't lean over and tip over. Alright, what was our min takeoff fuel? I have forgotten. There we go, that's pretty good. Is 5.8. And taking a look at our fuel totalizer is... Oh, it's 5.799. Do you know what? I saw 5.8. Did you? Yes, I did. Nose light is on. Winding up the engines. And again, there is no toga, no auto throttle, so you've got to sort of watch out. Engines are stable. Let's come over here. Where's the clock? Start the clock. And let's go. Decision speed is rotate 117. Rotate. I'm pulling all the way back on the stick. It's just not responding. Finally, it's there. So the trim setting is off. Perhaps I do need more flaps. And oh my goodness, is she a rocket? Wheels up. Now I'm trimming back down again after that insane difficulty of getting off the grounds. Now trim it up again. Come on, we can find it. Over to the right a little bit. I'm going to hit nav. And do we need flight directors? Nav. And I'm just going to follow those flight directors. We're good all the way up to 10,000 feet. Can't remember if I went over that. Let's set ourselves for 210. I'm going to retract the flaps to 1 degree. And I'm following the flight directors that are very, very sensitive. In fact, a little bit too sensitive for my liking, those flight directors. Look at them, I'm chasing them all over the shop. And the autopilot would aggressively follow them. And so just to help with my workload now, I'm going to go ahead and enable the autopilot. Vertical speed, which captures it at the speed that you were when you turned it on, which is great. I'm going to reduce that vertical speed a bit and climb 83% N1. Look at that, we're already up at 10,000. Man, was that like a rocket. Let's go flaps up. And now we're cleared up to, well, we'll just clear ourselves up to cruise, which was 280. Aircraft's following the departure route nicely, which the only restriction was we had to be 10,000 or above by the time we got to Bangor. We're just reducing power a bit while we get above 10. Take a look up here then. Wing lights can disappear, logo lights can go. Recognition light, nose light can go. We'll release the cabin crew, smoking signs auto, and I believe we're about to cross 10,000 now, and so with it the landing lights can go as well. Bit more power, I reduced it a little bit too much, so that's something to keep an eye on, your throttle settings here. And just to reduce workload even more, I'm going to set the speed climb now. I'm going to go for 290. And again, if no auto throttle, how does it pick the right speed? For those who haven't, obviously, who are new to it altogether, it just pitches up and down. And so whatever I'm doing with the throttle is almost irrelevant. It's going to pitch the aircraft up and down to match the speed that I've set. And in this case, I'm just shooting for 290. And so, yeah, you may think, oh, can't you set your screen right? No, it is a very long, thin aircraft. It is set right. CRJ-1000, it's a very thin tube. We'll take a look at the cabin in a sec if we haven't seen it already. Engines at the back, which obviously adds a lot of weight on the back, shifts the center of gravity to the rear, and that's why the wings are not halfway along but are situated in the rear half of the aircraft. Center of lift and gravity must be right around there, near this door. In fact, let's have a look. Which one was it? Is it Control M? I think it's Control M, so let's press it again. There we go. So there's the lift being simulated by the aircraft. So if you average those lines out, the middle, yeah, it's right around there where that rear door is, maybe even a little further back. It's interesting that this part of the aircraft is actually generating a bit of lift in the downwards direction, so it's actually pulling the aircraft down. We see here the fuselage causing a lot of drag. That's obviously to be expected. The wings are causing a little bit of drag. Wake turbulence being generated off the wing vortices. And that's it. Alright, let's focus back on the task at hand then. We're racing towards 28,000. We're climbing at 3,400. Thrust is more or less bang on. There is this engine sync here. It's currently off, so I'm going to set it to sync N1. I'm just going to move my throttles a little bit, and we'll see if it does sync them up. And again, as you can see, as soon as I move my throttles even slightly, you can see the ITT just instantaneously responds to that, even in the air. Yeah, so the sync, I can't tell if it's working, but to me, these throttles, you know, they're relatively close together. If sync was, I would say sync should interpret that as you're wanting the same. I don't know. So I'm just going to manually just move my left lever a little bit more. And here we are then approaching Bangor inside 8 miles. And we're well above the 10,000 prescribed or above. In fact, we're above changeover now. So let's do that real quick. Boom, go to standard. And we'll release the passenger. In fact, just before we do, let's go to half bank. So that reduces the bank angle, well, by half. With it, passengers will release. Speaking of which, let's open the safe door and take a look. It's a cabin, so there are no passengers modelled, although the cabin looks pretty... it looks okay. I've seen a lot worse. I like the texture on the seat. I've seen better. The seats have all got their own seat belts and are numbered accordingly. Although, why does it go D, F, A, C, D, F? So there's no B, there's no E. Surely there can't be a version of this aircraft that puts 3 seats per side. Just, there wouldn't be room for it. I wonder what that mouse button does. Is that a... Oh my goodness. Mouse wheel. It lets you raise and lower the shutters. Alright, that is just such a small thing. But small things, right? Wow, attention to detail, and for every window as well. That's madness. Oh, that, look at the shadow as well. And it seems so obvious, but... Oh, is it loud at the back near these engines? Noisiest shitter in the world. Let's shut the door. Come back here for a crafty fag. Oh, you can lock the door as well. I wonder, does that work? No. We've got a sink with a button. We've got some hand wash. We've got some toilet paper. We've got a working toilet seat, oh my goodness, and a flusher, but again, no water animation. And what's this? Doesn't work, whatever it is, unless I need to shut the toilet, do I? Oh, it does. You just got to shut the toilet lid so we can actually change your baby's nappy back here as well. Okay. And what's this? Oh, we've got the fold-out seating for the stewardesses. I guess when they're coming into land, they shut that door. This seat... I wonder if it works then. Come on then, let's shut the door. Let's try it. Seeing as we're trying these things. That is... That's how it is, man. That's how it is. Alright. Back to the front. Oh! Power back, almost redlined it. There you go. Should have been paying attention. Alright, let's reintroduce the power. Panic over. We've got the Mach number, and let's switch to Mach. I assume we push. We do. I'm going to go for 7.5. I think that's respectable. And again, with no auto throttle, you sort of got to set it, take a look at your speed trend, think, oh, that's about right, it's dipping a little bit, so just eke it up a little more. and then check back in like a minute or so then too. And if it's good, then check back in 5 and 10. And I found the aircraft to be pretty stable. It does seem to cruise in this nose down attitude once everything's set right. If I just come to the external view, that is indeed like that again. I'm not sure if that's realistic or not, but you can see there's definitely a nose down element to it. And I do like the aircraft as in how it's modelled. I think it's modelled very nicely. The reflections, the lighting, the design overall is decent. I'm not saying in terms of, you know, in favourite aircraft in real life, would it be? Clearly not. But alright, you've got what you've got. How faithfully is it reproduced? In terms of looks, it seems spot on to me. I flew in a smaller one once, a CRJ for British Airways, just as a passenger, that had one seat on one side of the aisle and 2 seats on the other. It was very small. And it felt surreal walking down there at 30,000 feet. I can tell you could look down to earth out both windows at the same time while you were walking. It was a bizarre experience. That most aircraft, you know, if you're walking down the aisle, you're too far away from the windows to see down. You just see the clouds. Anyway. Alright, so I'm relatively happy with that throttle. We've checked back a couple of minutes. It's good. And so let's start planning for our descent. And so coming in, see here, Charlie, Yankee, Quebec, Quebec. So we'll come over to the airport page. We'll clear this out. Charlie, Yankee, Quebec, Quebec. Boom, boom. And you see, it's a relatively small airport in terms of instructions. So we'll come over to the airport page itself. If we take a look at this, the only options suitable to us are runway 30 and runway 12. As you saw on the plan, we'd already elected to go with runway 12. And so let's just get rid of that for a moment. Come over to the approach page. And there's 2 suitable approaches for 12. We've got the ILS Zulu and the ILS Yankee. Clicking on Zulu, we can see that is just a straight in from Berbia. We're coming from this direction, so that's not suitable. Take a look at the ILS Yankee, and that's got a string of options that then feed us into Berbia, including Degby. Now, Degby is from the direction that we're coming from, and so that's what we're going to feed in. And so if we just get rid of that temporarily, we'll come back to the plan page on here, which I think is this one. Depart arrived, Charlie Yankee Quebec Quebec, ILS Yankee. There is no star. It's straight onto the approach. The ILS Yankee via, we've got the various options here. Degby is the one that we was after. And then exec. So that's it. Come over then to the legs page. And I'm just going to skip through for the purposes of this screen, which seems to have very little to do with what's being shown here. It's just this. The two seemed, even though the routes match exactly, the scroll button together with the page here just doesn't seem to necessarily match up. Although now that I've said it, it is doing. So there's Nanu, then there's a disco. I do like, this is a CRJ-ism. Nanu, there's a discontinuity or a disco. We see here, there's the disco. Then it goes Degby. Well, they've actually sewn up that discontinuity with a discontinuity waypoint. I really like that. Obviously, I don't need that, so I'm going to up-select Degby into the disco, exec that, and that gets rid of that disco and just joins it up officially, which is great. We'll continue to cycle through then from Degby. So here we go again. I've cycled through. Degby is not to be seen here yet. Clearly, it's the center mark. Scroll on. We've got Saxon. Same thing again. So sometimes the two match up, not always. Saxon, then we're over to Berbia. We see we do have some height restrictions here with there being no VNAV. I mean, there is a VNAV button, but really... next page. Cruise out. Let's just fill this in. 280. We did fill it in on another page, but target speed 76, which we're now on. Let's just increase the... that's sensitive. There we go, 76. So... we're more or less in line. So back to the legs page. So we need to somehow figure out then when do we start descending, because this thing doesn't tell us. So if I zoom out a little bit, At Nanu, well, first off, let's look at the mandatory heights for this. So the first mandatory height that we get isn't until this one. From Degby over to Saxon, we need to be 5,700 or above. And that's it. And so the rest of it is for us to figure out all the way down to 5,700. We see that is there. We see there's like all of these heights, therefore, are estimated. And so Yankee Juliet flight level 280, well, that's coming up momentarily. This reckons we should be Nanu 19.9. I'll tell you what, we'll go with what they say. They reckon the descent here 290. Do you know what? Let's go with it. 290. And see, yeah, there's no top of descent marked here, so it's for us to figure out. Do you know what? We'll start descending from Yankee Juliet, and we'll see how close that gives us. The other way of doing it is just measure all your miles, which we see here, 88. I assume these are track miles. Yes, because the airport we see is here. The airport's about 60 miles away. This here says 87. That's because we're going to swing around the other way slightly before doubling back on ourselves, because we're approaching from down this way. So we'll be coming along this one here, swinging around, and then on to final. So let's see. We'll also update our radios, because I'm going to get really busy really quick now, because the amount of automation on this is limited. So let's tune these in. So ILS, I'm going to put that in on my side again, 111.70, even though I'm not sure how to use the ILS on this aircraft. 111.70. We've got the VOR there. Comox, we'll put that in on your side, 1040. That's in, and everything else there is fine. We'll listen to the ATIS. We've got that 18.60. So let's get that in, 18.6, and that is it. Oh no, there's one more piece of information we need. So let's put that in on COM1. Just a little far away to hear that clearly. Here we are, Yankee Juliet. So let's get the descent underway. So I'm going to smoothly decrease the power, and rather than going all the way down to 5.6, I'm going to set the height at 10,000, because that's when we need to slow down. And so I've now reduced the thrust to idle. There's 10. I'm going to put the vertical speed on, get the descent going nice and gentle, and then switch over to speed hold mode. And we'll switch this from Mach over to 290. That was the speed. And that is a very, very aggressive descent from the autopilot. 10 degrees down pitch. Is now easing it off a bit. There we go. And so it was very aggressive to catch up with its profile. Come up here, and now that we're descending, put the wing lights back on, and we'll ask the passengers to take their seats. Bye, it's hot today in the UK, and here I am sat inside making this video for you. Do leave it a like if you're finding it useful. I'd appreciate that, or don't if you don't. If you're one of those that I don't leave a like throughout me, I'm just I don't leave it to. Well, I do once in a while if something's particularly good. Is this particularly good? I don't know. I'll leave it for you to decide. All right, yeah. Let's see if the weather is a little more audible now. It was 18.6. Oh, there we go.
Wind light and variable. Visibility for at 10 miles. Sky conditions scattered at 5,000. View at 7,300. Broken at 24,500. Temperature 11. Dew point 5. Altimeter 2984. Arrive
2984. We're about 5,000 away, and we'll be there in a minute or so with no stops. So I'm just going to go 2984, you know, now. I realise that's probably not legit, but whatever. Wind light and variable. That's all I need to hear. We've got the pressure. The temperature was outside the icing. So let's get rid of that. So, you know, ideally we'd just be straight in, right? But just for a little bit of something to do. So, yeah, back to the legs page. Nanu 20,000. So we're coming down, if anything, a little early. So again, all that I can do, or it's not all I can do, but I can add a little bit of power on. And because the autopilot's going to try keep us coming down at 290 knots, once the engines start putting power, it's going to reduce that rate of descent. We've currently got 2.4. Got actually a 29 knot crosswind from the right. Let's put a bit more power in. Translates to a bit more thrust, and there we go. The rate of descent is decreasing. We saw there the arc disappearing away. That's more like it. In fact, that's a little bit too slow now, so let's bring it back. So the airfield is around 40 miles away off our nose. We are swinging around, otherwise 19,000 feet would be a little alarming. We want to be around 10,000 feet, no more than 250 if it was 30 miles away, and even then, in this aircraft, I found this aircraft at certain speed regimes seems to be really hard to slow down, not least because the air brakes are tiny. We'll show you those at some. In fact, let's just do it now. So we've got the air brake lever here. We see we've got 4 settings in flight, 1, 2, 3, 4, as well as the off. So that's full. Look at the size of them on the wings. That's it. Here and here. There's a couple more boards that come up once we're on the ground, the spoilers overall. But those air brakes are it. Look at the angle of the descent, man. You really feel like you're going downhill if you're in there. So these air brakes seem alarmingly effective. The spoilers really are they? They're not air brakes. They do something a little different. They mess up the airflow over the wing. They spoil the lift, dumps the lift, and with it, the drag that comes with that. Anyway, we folded them away again, so we've seen those. And I think it's time to zoom in a little bit now on this little display. So you can see, yeah, at some point I'm going to bind this particular dial. But not during the flight. So we're well below the 18, so let's come up here. We already put the signs on, that's great. Put the logo light on as well. That lovely bit of turbulence there, you can see it just a little bit of rock here. They've really probably down to X-Plane more than anybody else. The weather is... When X-Plane 12 first came out, the weather was... Well, the turbulence wasn't great, was it? It was a little over-exaggeratedly twitchy somehow. But they've since nailed it. Feels to me spot on. To be fair to Flight Sim 2020, their turbulence model recently is very good as well. It's just a shame they've got such an amazing physics engine. Such an amazing graphics engine, an amazing weather engine, and it's coupled up with a terrible physics. It is a shame, because otherwise I'd be in that game all the time. We're still on the half bank. I think once wings level out here, we can go to full. We'll see, we're getting very close to 10,000. So what I'm going to do is just reduce speed to 280, just to cushion my approach into 10,000 a little bit. There we go. The wings are almost level now on this particular leg, so I'm going to get rid of the half bank. We're still on VNAV. Again, I'm sure there's no, LNAV, there's no VNAV on this. Where would it be? You've got to control the speed and the height yourself always, unless you use the autopilot for pitch, which is just based on either vertical speed or, pitch for speed. There's no VNAV chasing, which is fine. And so we're going to have to start paying attention. Here we come now down to 10,000. And I'm going to set my speed to 240. Accordingly, there we go. And that's going to cushion us nicely for 10. And again, I always found myself coming in too hot, too high when I was following this before. So I'm going to use the constraint here of Saxon. I'm going to ignore everything else. And if we'll take a look at our charts here so it's a little clearer. Saxon is this point here where, we're currently there. So I'm going to hide this icon because I always find it cheating. So we're on a 27-mile stretch. And we need to lose about 5,000 feet in that time, as well as the speed, because Saxon is a 210 or below, I assume. Or is it 210 mandatory? Let's have a little look. Max 210, so it's 210 or below, and that continues all the way around. So speed and height to lose. So coming up now to 240. I think I'm just going to give myself a nice shallow descent. Why not? So we'll put altitude first. Let's go vertical speed. Let's go with 500 feet a minute. And we'll dial it down as we're told to 5,700. 5.7. To find some of these a little small to read as standard. I'm sure there'll be some say, well, get your eyes chested then. I'm flying in 1440p, so I'm not in 4K on xplane. I just find it's... The last time I did it was an unusual drain of resources. I realised they've optimised the game a ton. Then it's just... Once you get used to something, you get used to it, don't you? But this particular aircraft, again, it's not reflection necessarily on Deltawing. It could just be that the CRJ's got awfully small instrumentation panel like that. It's just something to be aware of. It says on there that our phase is cruise. It's not at all. We're well on the way with the descent. Estimated time of arrival 4 minutes. Yeah, if we were flying direct to the airport, it'd be 4 minutes, but we're coming back round. It's probably more like, I wouldn't want to say 10, but maybe 12 minutes, something like that. Alright, so I'm going to increase my rate of descent now. Let's focus a bit more on the task at hand. 900 feet a minute, that will be quite nice. Just make sure we don't exceed 250. So what, I'm going to actually set my thing at 250 just so it's really obvious where 250 is. It's halfway between the two, but I just want that visual. Do not exceed this here. I'm happy to push up close to it. We're actually battling a 13 knot headwind at the minute as well, which is, you know, it's not massive, but it's inhibiting us a little bit. Let's pop up the speed a little bit. Alright, so let's have a look at some of the other things while we're just waiting for this whole part of the journey to unravel. So we've seen this here, the flight controls, that works great. And if you zoom in, by the way, I mean, currently the air is very stable, but the autopilot, you do see when there is a little bit of turbulence, you do see these ailerons ever so slightly going back and forth, which is exactly what you'd expect it to do, right? The autopilot basically dealing with, you know, any little lumps and bumps as they occur. Yeah, this here is all great. So this here, to me, yeah, this switch, even though there's an indicator, it's not letting me either click or mouse wheel. I can't manipulate it. So this here would be your weather radar. It's just not, yeah, it's not doing anything. I don't want to press too much and end up crashing the module, but none of these controls work. Yaw damper and pressing those doesn't seem to make any difference. Disconnect. Yaw damper is off, so apparently it is disconnected. And apparently it's still disconnected, so perhaps I shouldn't have pressed that during the flight. Yaw damper. Oh dear. Alright, well, we'll see if it makes a difference then. Yaw damper was originally a thing that was to prevent a Dutch roll. So airliners, right, would just by their design start entering. They would start swaying one way to the other, and as the plane swayed to the left, the pilot would correct to the right, and vice versa. And he would use the flight controls to do it traditionally, right? Obviously, the plane steers to the left, you're going to naturally want to steer to the right, but this would cause this weird yawing effect that got worse and worse as he did this, especially with certain aircraft, and that became known as the Dutch roll. In fact, it got so bad that it would, pilots were trained explicitly to deal with it, and then at some bright spark came up with the, oh well, we'll put a yaw damper in, and then it will prevent that even starting to take place. And apparently we've just kicked it out, and there doesn't seem to be any obvious way of getting it back in. But so far, the aircraft ain't entering a Dutch roll, which could just be that that's the way it's intended to be. So flight time so far coming up to 27 minutes, and the arriving airport is in view out of our left window. There it is. Currently what would be on the downwind, or the prescribed part of the downwind leg. Get a nice passenger view. Yeah, the thing with this blind is I can't now use the mouse wheel to zoom because I'm just controlling the thing. So you'd actually have to turn the camera a little bit away from the window to control the zoom like this, and then move it in place. Or I guess just move it out of the way as well. So if I'm trying to zoom now, I can't, again, because I'm controlling the blind. But I guess if I wanted to, I could move the camera here, zoom, and then there we go. Anyway, that there looks great. That looks really good, does that? That is not a million miles away from real. Lighting spot on. Textures of the wing, reflections, love it. The darkness, because we're below clouds, even during the day, it's spot on. See, there's a tiny bit of sunlight hitting the airfield right around there. That's about it. All right. Idle the engines. Let's go to speed. Why is it not descending? We had the vertical speed in. I don't know. Let's focus on the task now, because otherwise I'm really going to screw this up. So Saxon is 10 miles away. We're to be 5,700. After that, it's Burbia at 3,600 or above. And we need to be 210 knots, so I'm going to have to make use of these Diddy spoilers. Look at them. You're just like, looking at that, you'd think, how on earth is that able to affect anything anyhow? Well, let's have a look. 3,100 feet, and we're stable at 250 versus the 1,100. So there's your answer. It more than doubles the rate of descent. Coming over here, where are we? Here we are for landing speeds then. So again, this is always updated because you see here the fuel trickles away. What's interesting is 2 engines idling away use about as much fuel as the APU, at least according to this. We'll load landing speeds in, and I'm not entirely sure to be... V2 is, I guess, the goer at. Strange numbers here. I guess the ref here, 162, seems a very high landing speed when takeoff speeds were 116. Again, no idea really what to make of that. Right, here we are, 5,700. And so with it, we can reduce speed to 210. And we're a couple of miles away. And so I'm going to fold the boards away now. Fancy spoilers that small having 4 settings as well. We can see they do make a difference. And as soon as we pass Saxon, once this turn begins, we can descend down to 3.6. So I'm going to go ahead and pre-dial 3.6. There is the turn. So I'm going to use vertical speed to attain it. In fact, we use the speed button again to make sure that we don't violate the restriction of 210. And that's working perfectly. Again, I'm just not confident with the ILS system in this aircraft. We've tuned it in on the radios, 11170. We do get a horizontal guidance indicator once it comes up. It'll be this green bar, we'll see it. But it's... I don't recall vertical guidance. Let's also go for the minimums. That was one thing I did forget to do. I'm going to ignore all of these here, and I'm just going to go for the glide slope out, because as far as I'm concerned, the glide slope is out for me. 520 on the Barrow, 443 on the radio. I'm going to go with the Barrow. And if we take a look here, decision height or the MDA for the Barrow. And... push to set. There we go. So you got to push it, then you can set it. MDA 520. There we go. Alright, so this was this green bar that I was talking about. There's Burbia for 3,600. So I'm gonna have to put the spoilers on again. And then the next one is 2030. So I'm just gonna call it 2000. Igvik 2000. So there's this green line that I was talking about, and that's giving us in line with the runway. If we take a look out the front, yeah, runway's there, and the autopilot is rolling out. That's it, dropping us out right in front of the runway. We've got a 6-knot tailwind. I'm not going to worry too much about that. I am struggling a little to descend. We've still got, what's that, about 5 or 6 miles to lose, 1,800 feet. I got to switch up to half boards because I also need to reduce speed. Look how slow the rate of descent is here. 900 feet a minute despite air. Let's go full air brakes. What does that give us? 1,200. So this is where you're going to struggle to get down. 1,200 feet a minute descent with full air brakes. Of course, here's a little something I picked up in Nam. Wheels down. That's a silly thing I wanted to say. Gears down. Flaps 1. And that's helped out with the drag. Got about 1,000 feet to go. 2,500. Radal is alive. Runway in sight. I'm going to assume now that we're clear to land. I did forget to put the landing lights on, but that's all been sorted now. And cabin crew, take seats for landing. Let's go another notch of flaps, and I'm going to disconnect the autopilot. We've got 200 feet to go and about 1 mile, so we're pretty much on and on. Let's get to start reducing the boards, go flaps 10. And I'm going to focus on the landing at this stage. And again, what was the speeds? I don't know what that to make of that. I'm going to go with 134. Hang on, did that just change by a ton? 130. Okay, it changes dynamically based on what flaps you've got set at the time. Well, that's interesting. Let's do away with the spoilers. Trimming back. Bit of power now. And one thing I should have perhaps addressed this before. We've got the thrust reversers. I'm going to arm those. And the spoilers here, automatic. We've got manual disarm or auto. Going to leave it on auto. And now I'm going to focus on the landing. Flaps are, I think, 1 setting to go. And I'm needing a lot of power suddenly. Come on, where's my throttle? I've got no throttle. My throttle is not working. What's happened? My throttle lever is working, but my throttles have disconnected. My throttles are literally not working. What is this?
400. Too low. Gear. Too low. Gear.
Why is my throttle levers decided to stop working? Something here is not right. And I'm just gonna pause this because again, this is a bit of a problem. Like mega style.
400.
Let me just trim up. You may say, oh wait, you've got a dodgy joystick. Have I? Let's have a look then. Joystick, throttle. They're working fine. Look at that. 1 and 2. They're working absolutely fine. So why have they suddenly decided to stop working? That's terrible. I can't land a plane with no working throttle.
Don't think.
That is unfortunate. And I'm gonna... I hate to leave this like this. But I'm gonna have to leave that in because it would be dishonest if I didn't. The throttle literally stopped working on final, even though you see that there's no reason for it not to.
40, 30. Too low. Gear. 20.
Dump the gear again. Good call. Come on.
10.
Manual braking. Now it's only got manual brakes anyway. The only thing that's automatic is the spoilers. Oh my goodness, that's going to have cooked the brakes right good and proper. But we live to tell the tale. Who wants to see that approach? Do you know what? I really thought, do you know what? This video's gone all right. I'm like kind of okay with how that's gone. And then the last 2 minutes, it really went sideways, didn't it? Oh my goodness. And now X-Plane's crashed entirely. It's crashed. All right. Until next time, I hope you enjoyed that one. That's a terrible ending to the... That's the wrong page. That was the one I was looking for. A terrible ending to the video. But never mind. It gives you a true taste of what it's like. I hope these guys iron it out. And until then, take care. Wherever in the world you may be. Ta-ra.